Marcus Chen stood frozen in the marble corridor of his Manhattan penthouse, his heart pounding against his ribs. At 3 in the morning, he had returned from Tokyo earlier than planned, exhausted from negotiations that would expand his tech empire into Asian markets. The silence of his home felt wrong somehow, unsettling in a way he couldn't immediately place. Then he heard it, a soft whimpering sound coming from the terrace. His blood ran cold. That was his son crying. He rushed through the French doors, and the sight before him shattered every assumption he had about his carefully ordered life. There, on the stone bench overlooking Central Park, lay Sophia Martinez, his housekeeper of 2 years. She was curled around 6-month-old Daniel, both of them covered by a thin blanket that did nothing against the October chill. The baby would press against her chest, and even in sleep, her arms formed protective cage around him. Her clothes were the same uniform she wore during the day, now wrinkled and damp from the night air. Marcus felt rage explode through his chest. What kind of negligence was this? He had hired Sophia because his assistant promised she was the best, experienced, trustworthy, professional. He paid her generously to care for Daniel while he traveled, to give his son the attention that his late wife, Catherine, would have given. Catherine, who died bringing Daniel into this world, who made Marcus promise with a final breath that their son would always be loved and protected. And now this woman had fallen asleep outside with his child. He stepped forward, his expensive shoes clicking against stone. Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him standing there in his tailored suit, his face dark with fury, something unexpected flashed across her features. Not guilt or fear, but relief, profound, desperate relief. Her lips trembled as she whispered 2 words that changed everything. Thank God. Marcus demanded answers, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Sophia sat up carefully, still cradling Daniel against her shoulder, and the words tumbled out in a rush. She had discovered something terrible that evening, something that made sleeping outside their only option for survival. As she spoke, Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet, his anger transforming into something far more dangerous. It started when Sophia had put Daniel down for his evening nap around 7. She went to the kitchen to prepare his bottles for the night, but the formula smelled strange, acidic and wrong. She had opened a fresh container that morning, but now it had an odd chemical odor that sent alarm bells ringing through her mind. Sophia had grown up poor in Guatemala, where mothers learned to trust their instinct because a mistake could mean death. She tested a drop on her tongue and immediately spit it out. The burning sensation confirmed her worst fear. Someone had contaminated the formula. Her hand shaking, Sophia searched the penthouse. In the nursery closet, hidden behind extra blankets, she found a small bottle with no label. Just drops of this, she realized, mix into Daniel's food over time. Not enough to kill quickly, but enough to make a healthy baby sick. Sick enough that his death might look natural, explainable, tragic. Her mind raced through the possibilities of who and why, but survival instinct overrode investigation. She had to protect Daniel, but she couldn't leave the building. Security would stop her at this hour, would call Marcus's assistant Richard for authorization. Richard, who had hired her. Richard, who had access to everything. So Sophia did the only thing she could think of. She took Daniel to the one place she knew had no cameras, the private terrace Marcus never used. She would wait for Marcus to return, would keep the baby safe until she could tell him face to face. Hours passed in cold terror. She had no phone, no way to reach Marcus overseas. All she could do was hold Daniel close and pray they would survive the night. Now, as she finished her story, Sophia watched Marcus's expression transform from fury to something that frightened her even more. Absolute, controlled rage. Marcus moved with lethal precision. He took Daniel from Sophia's arms, checking his son with hands that trembled despite his efforts at control. The baby seemed healthy, alert, his small fingers grasping at Marcus's collar. Relief flooded through him, but it was quickly consumed by a burning need for answers. He turned to Sophia, seeing her clearly for the first time, this woman who had sacrificed her own safety for his son. Her eyes were hollow from exhaustion, her lips cracked from the cold, but there was steel in her spine. Richard, Marcus said, the name tasting like poison. His assistant of 5 years, the man who managed his household, who had stood beside him at Catherine's funeral. Why would he want Daniel dead? But even as he asked, pieces were falling into place. Richard's insistence on handling the estate planning, his suggestion that Marcus name him as Daniel's guardian just in case something happened. The generous life insurance policy on Daniel that Richard had recommended. Marcus had been so consumed by grief and work that he had signed everything without question. Sophia spoke quietly, her voice steady despite her fear. "There's more, Mr. Chen. I found documents in Richard's office 3 days ago when I was cleaning. I wasn't snooping, I swear. They were just there on his desk. Papers about your company, about shares transferring if Daniel didn't survive to age 5. I didn't understand all of it, but I photographed them with his computer camera and emailed them to myself. I was trying to figure out what to do, who to tell. Then tonight I found the poison, and I knew time had run out." Marcus felt ice water replace the blood in his veins. His company was worth $8 billion. Daniel owned 30% through Catherine's estate. If Daniel died before age 5, those shares would be redistributed according to the partnership agreement Marcus had signed years ago, before marriage, before fatherhood, when such clauses seemed like abstract legal necessities. The shares would go to the senior partners. Richard had been appointed senior partner just 6 months ago. Marcus made swift decisions. He called his personal lawyer, not from his regular phone, but from a burner device he kept for sensitive business. While waiting for help to arrive, he sent Sophia to pack bags for Daniel, only essentials they could carry. They needed to leave immediately, before Richard realized his plan had been discovered. But Marcus had underestimated how closely they were being watched. As Sophia returned with a small bag, the penthouse elevator chimed. Someone was coming up. The private elevator that only 3 people could access, Marcus, Richard, and Marcus's head of security, who reported directly to Richard. "The terrace," Marcus hissed, grabbing the bag and pulling Sophia with him. They rushed outside just as the elevator doors opened. Through the glass, Marcus saw Richard step into the penthouse, but he wasn't alone. 2 large men followed him, their intentions clear in their cold expressions. This wasn't a visit. This was a clean-up operation. Richard must have been monitoring the building cameras remotely, must have seen Marcus return and known his plan had failed. Now he was coming to finish the job himself, to make it look like a tragedy, perhaps a home invasion, a murder-suicide, something that would leave him free to claim his prize. Marcus looked down at the 70-story drop below the terrace. They were trapped. His mind raced through options, each one more desperate than the last. Sophia gripped his arm, her eyes wide with terror but also determination. "The maintenance ladder," she whispered urgently, "on the north side of the terrace. It goes down 2 floors to the service corridor. I've seen the window washers use it." Marcus had never noticed it, had never paid attention to the infrastructure of his own building. But Sophia, who existed in the invisible spaces of his world, knew every detail. They could hear Richard's voice now, calling out in false concern. "Marcus, are you home? Security called me, said your plane landed early. I wanted to make sure everything was all right." The words were smooth, practiced, but Marcus heard the underlying tension. Richard was buying time, positioning his men. The descent down the maintenance ladder was terrifying. Marcus went first, Daniel strapped against his chest in the baby carrier Sophia had grabbed. Sophia followed, the bag slung across her back. 2 floors below, they crashed through an emergency access window into a service corridor that reeked of industrial cleaner. Alarms blared, which was exactly what Marcus wanted. Witnesses, attention, chaos that would make murder complicated. They ran through the maze of service passages, Sophia leading the way through a world Marcus never knew existed in his own building. They emerged in the parking garage just as Marcus's lawyer arrived with 2 off-duty police officers he trusted completely. Within an hour, Richard and his accomplices were in custody. The evidence Sophia had gathered, combined with the poison formula and Richard's obvious panic, painted a clear picture of attempted murder and conspiracy. In the following weeks, investigators discovered the full scope of the plot, forged documents, bribes to security staff, and a paper trail that showed Richard had been siphoning millions from the company for years, hoping to use Daniel's inheritance as his final score. Marcus stood in the penthouse nursery, watching Sophia rock Daniel to sleep. She had refused to leave them, even when offered a generous severance and glowing references. "He needs consistency," she had said simply. "He needs someone who loves him." Over the months that followed, Marcus came to understand what Sophia had known all along. that love wasn't about blood or money or obligation. It was about showing up in the cold night, about sacrificing safety for protection, about choosing another person's life over your own comfort. He promoted Sophia from housekeeper to Daniel's full-time nanny, with a salary that made her gasp and benefits that secured her family's future. But more than that, she became part of their family. When Daniel took his first steps, Sophia was there. When he spoke his first word, Mama, looking directly at Sophia, Marcus felt his heart break and heal simultaneously. Catherine would have loved her, he realized, would have recognized a kindred spirit, another fierce protector of their son. Years later, when Daniel asked about the night that changed everything, Marcus told him the truth. He told him about the woman who slept on a cold bench to keep him safe, who risked everything when she could have simply walked away. And he made sure Daniel understood that heroes don't always wear capes or carry badges. Sometimes they wear housekeeping uniforms and speak with accents, invisible to a world that doesn't value them, until the moment when their courage becomes the only thing standing between love and loss.